The glass towers of Chicago gleam like ice in the December wind, their surfaces reflecting a city where fortunes were made and lives were broken with equal indifference. In America, they tell you that hard work pays off, that if you play by the rules, show up every day, and sacrifice everything for your family, the system will reward you. They tell you that dignity has no price tag. They lied. Sometimes the most dangerous betrayals come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes the people who can destroy you are the ones who make you feel most seen. And sometimes, when you're a man with calloused hands and a daughter who still believes the world is fair, you discover that the woman sharing her lunch with you could buy and sell your entire existence without checking her bank balance. The newspaper photograph would change everything three people caught in a moment of stolen happiness, unaware that their private world was about to collide with forces that had been in motion long before they ever met. In a world built on appearances, the truth has a way of cutting deeper than any blade. The December wind cut through Chicago like a blade, carrying with it the promise of snow and the weight of desperation. Robert Bobby Martinez stood in front of the bathroom mirror of his small apartment, trying to knot a tie that had seen better days. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that today's interview at Titanium Industries might be his last real chance. At 45, Bobby had learned that life rarely offered second chances, let alone third ones. The engineering degree gathering dust in his closet was a relic from a different era, back when companies valued experience over youth, when a man could work 30 years at the same place and retire with dignity. That world had ended for him in 2008, along with his job, his savings, and eventually, his wife's life. "Dad, your tie's crooked," Emma called from the kitchen, her voice carrying the gentle authority of a 12-year-old who'd grown up too fast. Bobby smiled despite the knot in his stomach. Emma had been his anchor these past 3 years, the reason he kept fighting when everything else felt hopeless. She sat at their small kitchen table, carefully packing her school supplies while simultaneously keeping an eye on the clock and on him. "Mrs. Peterson called," Emma said, not looking up from her backpack. "She can't watch me today. Her grandson's sick." Bobby's hand stilled on his tie. Mrs. Peterson was their elderly neighbor, the only person he trusted to watch Emma when school let out early. The timing couldn't be worse. His interview was at 2 o'clock, and Emma's half-day ended at noon. "It's okay, Dad," Emma said quickly, reading his expression. "I can wait in the lobby. I'll bring my sketchbook and be super quiet." Bobby knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in his calloused ones. This isn't exactly a kid-friendly place. It's a big corporate building, with security guards and cameras and probably a nice receptionist who won't mind if I sit quietly and draw." Emma finished, her dark eyes serious but determined. "Dad, we need this job." "I know we do. The letters from the bank aren't exactly subtle." Sometimes Bobby forgot that Emma was still a child. She'd been forced to grow up when her mother got sick, learning to navigate hospital corridors and insurance forms, understanding words like terminal and financial hardship before most kids her age knew how to ride a bike. "You sure about this, kiddo?" Emma grinned, the expression transforming her serious face back into that of a 12-year-old. "Dad, I've been to worse places than some fancy office building. Remember when you had to take me to that warehouse job interview? The guy had a parrot that kept swearing." Bobby laughed, the sound easing some of the tension in his chest. "All right, but you stick close to me. Okay, and if anyone asks, you're a single dad doing your best, and sometimes life doesn't give you perfect options." Emma recited, "I know the drill." An hour later, they stood before the imposing glass facade of Titanium Industries. The building stretched 30 stories into the gray Chicago sky, its surface reflecting the city's industrial heritage while proclaiming its modern ambitions. Bobby had researched the company thoroughly, founded by the Sterling family in the 1970s, now one of the Midwest's largest manufacturers of industrial equipment. "Wow," Emma breathed, craning her neck to see the top. "It's like a giant glass mountain." Bobby checked his watch. 1:45 p.m. 15 minutes early, just the way his father had taught him. Remember what we practiced. Sit quietly, draw in my sketchbook. Don't touch anything expensive. And if anyone asks, tell them you're the best fix-it person in all of Chicago. That's my girl. The lobby was even more intimidating than the exterior. Marble floors stretched beneath a ceiling that seemed to reach into the clouds, while abstract art pieces that probably cost more than Bobby's annual income adorned the walls. A waterfall feature dominated one corner, its gentle sound somehow making the space feel even more vast and expensive. Emma squeezed his hand as they approached the reception desk, where a woman in her 50s smiled warmly at them. Mr. Martinez for the 2 o'clock interview, Bobby said, his voice steadier than he felt. Of course, the receptionist replied, her gaze briefly settling on Emma with curious kindness rather than judgment. I'm Janet. You can have a seat over there, and someone will be down to collect you shortly. They settled into leather chairs that probably cost more than Bobby's monthly rent. Emma immediately pulled out her sketchbook and began drawing, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Bobby watched her work, marveling at how she could find beauty and possibility in any situation. What Bobby didn't know was that 3 floors above, Catherine Sterling was watching them through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office. Catherine Kate Sterling had been having the kind of morning that made her question every decision that had led her to this glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. The quarterly board meeting had been particularly brutal, with her younger brother Richard pontificating about market expansion, while the other board members nodded like bobbleheads. None of them knew, or perhaps they chose to ignore, that the woman sitting quietly at the far end of the conference table actually controlled the majority stake in Titanium Industries. Kate preferred it that way. Mostly, let Richard be the face of the company, the one who dealt with press conferences and investor meetings. She was content to pull the strings from behind the curtain, making the decisions that really mattered while maintaining the fiction that she was simply the CEO's older sister, with a fancy title and no real power. At 42, Kate had learned that being underestimated was often an advantage. Her Harvard MBA hung in her private office, not the public one, and her divorce settlement from tech entrepreneur Marcus Chen remained sealed in court records. The world saw her as Richard Sterling's spinster sister. They had no idea she could buy and sell most of them without touching her trust fund. She was reviewing the morning's productivity reports when movement in the lobby caught her eye. A man and a young girl had entered, both looking slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the space but not intimidated. The man wore a suit that had clearly seen better days but was clean and well-pressed. His dark hair was graying at the temples, and he carried himself with the straight-backed posture of someone who'd learned to find dignity in difficult circumstances. But it was the girl who captured Kate's attention. While her father spoke to Janet at the reception desk, the child, maybe 11 or 12, was looking around the lobby with the eyes of an artist, taking in details that most adults missed. When they sat down, she immediately pulled out a sketchbook and began drawing, completely absorbed in her work. Kate found herself moving closer to the window, watching as the man she assumed he was the girl's father bent down to check on her drawing. The tender gesture, the way the girl smiled up at him, the obvious bond between them. It stirred something in Kate that she'd buried years ago. Her intercom buzzed. Ms. Sterling, there's a Robert Martinez here for the facilities supervisor interview. Should I send him up? Kate glanced at her watch. She had no reason to be interested in a facilities hire that was typically handled 3 levels below her pay grade. But something about the man in the lobby, the way he gently ruffled his daughter's hair before following Janet to the elevator, made her curious. Give me 5 minutes, then send him to conference room B, she said. I'll observe from the adjoining office. Her assistant's pause was barely perceptible. Of course, Ms. Sterling. Kate told herself she was simply maintaining oversight of company hiring practices. She certainly wasn't spying on a job interview because a single father's devotion to his daughter had reminded her of everything missing from her own carefully controlled life. Conference room B was sterile and intimidating, designed to make job candidates feel the weight of corporate hierarchy. Kate slipped into the small adjoining office, where a two-way mirror allowed her to observe interviews without being seen. It was a relic from her father's era, when he believed in studying people's unguarded reactions. Robert Martinez entered the room with quiet confidence, shaking hands with Tom Richardson from HR and Sandra Walsh from Facilities Management. He didn't fidget or oversell himself. He simply answered their questions with honest directness. "So there's a 2-year gap in your employment history," Sandra noted, studying his resume. "My wife was sick," Robert replied without defensiveness. "Cancer. I took care of her and our daughter. After she passed, I did freelance work, home repairs, small construction jobs while Emma adjusted to the new normal." "That must have been difficult," Tom said, his tone softening. "It was. But you do what you have to do for family." Kate found herself leaning forward, studying the man's face. There was no self-pity in his expression, no attempt to manipulate sympathy. Just the quiet strength of someone who'd survived the worst life could throw at him and kept moving forward. "Your technical background is impressive," Sandra continued. "Mechanical engineering degree, 15 years at Morrison Industrial before the layoffs. But this position is primarily maintenance and custodial work. It's a significant step down from what you used to do. With respect, Tana, ma'am, there's nothing beneath a man who's trying to provide for his family. I can fix anything with moving parts. I show up on time, and I don't cause problems. Sometimes that's exactly what a company needs." Kate smiled despite herself. When was the last time someone in this building had spoken so plainly about dignity and work? The interview continued for another 20 minutes, covering technical questions and practical scenarios. Robert answered each one with competence and quiet confidence. When they asked about his availability for overtime or weekend work, he explained that he'd need advance notice to arrange childcare, but was willing to be flexible. "We have an on-site childcare facility," Sandra mentioned casually. "It's primarily for executive families, but we do have some space available." Kate blinked. Titanium's childcare facility was indeed reserved for senior management, a perk that cost the company substantial money, but was rarely used. She made a mental note to speak with Sandra later. As the interview concluded, Kate watched Robert Martinez shake hands with both interviewers, thank them for their time, and walk out with the same quiet dignity he'd brought in. Through the window, she could see him reunite with his daughter in the lobby, kneeling down to hear about her drawing. "Well," Sandra's voice came through the intercom. "What do you think?" Kate paused. She had no business involving herself in a facilities hire. Her role was to make strategic decisions, not to meddle in HR matters because a man's devotion to his daughter had touched something in her carefully guarded heart. "Hire him," she said simply. "The committee hasn't finished reviewing all the candidates." "Hire him," Kate repeated. "And Sandra, look into getting his daughter enrolled in our childcare program. I'm sure we can find the space." There was a pause. "Of course, Ms. Sterling. I'll take care of it immediately." Kate remained at the window long after Robert and Emma Martinez had left the building. For the first time in months, she found herself curious about Monday morning, wondering if she might happen to find herself in the employee cafeteria around lunchtime, just to see how the new hire was settling in. Bobby's first week at Titanium Industries passed in a blur of orientation sessions, security badges, and learning the layout of a building that seemed designed to intimidate visitors and employees alike. The work itself was familiar, fixing broken equipment, maintaining HVAC systems, troubleshooting electrical problems, but the environment was unlike anywhere he'd worked before. The other maintenance staff, mostly men in their 50s and 60s who'd been with the company for decades, welcomed him with the casual acceptance of people who understood that life sometimes dealt hard hands. They taught him the building's quirks, which elevator made that grinding noise that meant nothing, where to find the good coffee, and how to avoid the executive floors during quarterly reviews. Sterling's not so bad. Joe Martinez, no relation, despite the shared surname mentioned during their first lunch together. The old man, Richard Sr., he was a real hard ass. But his kids, well, the son's got his father's ambition, but not his mean streak. And the daughter, she's barely around, Heard she's got some fancy education but keeps to herself. Bobby found himself settling into a routine that felt sustainable for the first time in months. The pay was better than anything he'd found in 2 years of job hunting. The benefits included health insurance that didn't require him to choose between medication and groceries. And best of all, Emma was thriving in the company's childcare program. "It's like a really nice school," Emma had reported after her first day. "Mrs. Chen teaches art, and there's a computer lab, and they have actual books, not just tablets. Plus, the snacks are way better than what we have at home." Bobby had felt a stab of guilt at that last comment, but Emma had quickly hugged him. "Not that your snacks are bad, Dad. These are just fancier." It was during his second week that Bobby first encountered Kate Sterling, though he had no idea who she was at the time. He was in the employee cafeteria, picking at a sandwich while reviewing a work order for the 23rd floor, when someone slid into the seat across from him. Bobby looked up to see a woman in her early 40s with intelligent green eyes and dark blonde hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore black slacks and a cream-colored blouse, professional, but not ostentatious. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, even though she was already seated. "The lunch rush has claimed every other table." Bobby glanced around the half-empty cafeteria but didn't point out the obvious. "Of course, I'm Bobby Martinez. Facilities." "Kate," she replied, unwrapping what looked like a homemade sandwich. "Legal department. Nice to meet you. How long have you been with the company?" Kate paused, seeming to consider the question. "Feels like forever," she said finally. "What about you? You're new, right? Second week, still figuring out which elevator goes where and why the coffee on the 15th floor tastes like motor oil?" Kate laughed, a genuine sound that lit up her entire face. "Pro tip, the good coffee is on the 28th floor. Executive break room. Most people are too intimidated to go up there, but the security guards don't actually check credentials if you look like you belong. Speaking from experience, let's just say I've never met a coffee hierarchy I couldn't navigate." Kate took a bite of her sandwich, studying him with curious eyes. "So what brought you to Titanium? Most of our facilities hires come from other industrial companies, but your background says engineering." Bobby was surprised she knew anything about his background. But then again, maybe the legal department reviewed all new hires. "Life happened," he said simply. "Sometimes you take the jobs that are available, not the ones you plan for." "Fair enough." Kate didn't push for details, which Bobby appreciated. "How are you finding it so far?" "Honestly, better than expected. The work is solid, the people are decent, and they have an amazing childcare program. My daughter Emma thinks she's hit the lottery. She's here during the day, after school and during breaks. She's 12, old enough to not need constant supervision, but young enough that I don't want her home alone in our neighborhood." Bobby realized he was oversharing and pulled back. "Sorry, I don't usually dump my personal life on strangers." "Don't apologize, and it sounds like you're a good father." There was something wistful in Kate's tone that made Bobby look at her more closely. "Do you have kids?" "No," Kate said quietly. "Never had the chance. Focused on career, then marriage, then divorce. By the time I thought about it seriously, I was alone again." "It's never too late," Bobby offered gently. Kate smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes it feels like it is. What about you? Are you?" "Widowed. 3 years now." Bobby found it easier to say than it used to be, though the weight of it still settled in his chest. "Emma's mother died of cancer. It's just been the two of us since then." "I'm sorry." "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. But Emma, she's amazing. Stronger than I am. Most days." Bobby checked his watch and realized his lunch break was nearly over. "I should get back. Work order that needs finishing before the end of shift." "Of course, it was nice talking with you." "Bobby, you too." "Kate." As Bobby walked away, Kate remained at the table, watching him go. She'd meant to introduce herself casually, Maybe strike up a conversation with the new hire who'd caught her attention during his interview. She hadn't expected to find herself genuinely drawn to his quiet strength and obvious devotion to his daughter. More concerning, she hadn't expected the sharp pang of longing that had hit her when he talked about Emma. Kate had convinced herself years ago that she didn't want children, that her career and independence were enough. But listening to Bobby describe his daughter's excitement about the childcare program, seeing the way his entire face softened when he mentioned her, it awakened something Kate had thought she'd successfully buried. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to Sandra Walsh's number. "Sandra, it's Kate Sterling. I wanted to check on how our new hire is working out. Robert Martinez, facilities. Oh, he's excellent. Punctual, skilled, gets along well with the other staff. His daughter's a delight too. Mrs. Chen says she's one of the most polite children they've ever had in the program. Good to hear. And there haven't been any issues with the childcare arrangement. None at all. In fact, I was going to put in a request to expand the program. We've had several employees ask about it lately, and Mr. Martinez's situation really highlighted how valuable it could be for our workers." Kate felt a small flush of pride. "That sounds like a worthwhile investment. Draft a proposal and send it to my office." "Will do. Is there anything specific about Mr. Martinez you'd like me to monitor?" Kate paused. "No, just keep me informed. I like to stay aware of how our newer employees are adjusting." After ending the call, Kate sat in her office and stared out at the Chicago skyline. She'd built her life around control, around carefully managed relationships and calculated risks. Bobby Martinez represented something entirely outside those parameters. A man who'd found grace in hardship, who prioritized love over ambition, who made her question whether the walls she'd built around her heart were protection or prison. She told herself it was simple curiosity, nothing more. But as she found herself planning to eat lunch in the cafeteria again tomorrow, Kate had to admit that Robert Martinez and his daughter were becoming more than just interesting additions to the titanium industries family. They were becoming people she genuinely cared about. And for someone who'd spent years avoiding emotional entanglements, that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Over the following weeks, Bobby and Kate's cafeteria meetings became a pleasant routine neither of them acknowledged as intentional. Kate would appear with her homemade lunch just as Bobby was settling in with his, and they'd find themselves at the same table, talking about everything from Chicago politics to Emma's latest artistic endeavors. Bobby learned that Kate was a University of Chicago graduate who'd somehow ended up in corporate law, that she preferred hiking to shopping, and that she had strong opinions about the Cubs' chances next season. Kate discovered that Bobby had once built his own motorcycle from salvage parts, that he could fix almost anything with enough time and the right tools, and that his daughter was already showing signs of inheriting his mechanical aptitude. "She wants to be an architect," Bobby mentioned one afternoon, showing Kate a sketch Emma had drawn of a building that looked like it was dancing. "Says she wants to design buildings that make people happy just by looking at them." Kate studied the drawing with genuine interest. "She's got a real eye for design. Has she thought about summer programs? I know Northwestern has some excellent architecture camps for young students." "Those kinds of programs are usually pretty expensive," Bobby said carefully. "But maybe when she's older, if I can save up." Kate made a mental note to research the scholarship opportunities, then caught herself. She was getting too involved, too invested in a relationship that was supposed to be casual workplace friendship. But something about Bobby's quiet pride in his daughter, his refusal to make excuses for their financial limitations while never giving up on Emma's dreams, made Kate want to find ways to help. "You know," she said casually, "I might know someone who works in the Northwestern architecture department. Let me ask around about scholarship opportunities." Bobby's expression was carefully neutral. "That's kind of you, but you don't need to." "I know I don't need to. I want to." Emma sounds like exactly the kind of student those programs are designed to help. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sandra Walsh, who approached their table with a slight frown creasing her forehead. "Bobby, I'm glad I found you. We've had a last-minute situation on the 29th floor. Some kind of electrical issue in the main conference room, and there's an important client meeting this afternoon. Think you can take a look? Bobby was already standing, his mind shifting into problem-solving mode. What kind of electrical issue? Intermittent power loss? The IT guys think it might be a wiring problem, but they're not sure where to start. I'll head up now. Bobby turned to Kate. Sorry to cut lunch short. Go, Kate said with a smile. Save the day. After Bobby left, Sandra lingered at the table. He's really exceptional, isn't he? We've had electrical contractors come in for smaller issues than this, but Bobby just handles things. Kate nodded, watching Bobby's retreating figure. He seems very competent. His daughter's a sweetheart, too. Mrs. Chen says she's been helping some of the younger children with their art projects. Natural teacher instincts? That's lovely to hear. Sandra hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Ms. Sterling, can I ask, is there a particular reason you've been monitoring Mr. Martinez's performance so closely? Not that there's anything wrong with it, she added quickly. I just want to make sure I'm providing the right kind of reports. Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks. I monitor all our new hires. Sandra, I like to ensure we're maintaining quality standards. Of course, Sandra replied, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Well, for what it's worth, he's probably the best facilities hire we've made in years. The other staff respect him. He's solving problems we didn't even know we had, and his work ethic is impressive. After Sandra left, Kate remained at the table, finishing her lunch and thinking about the conversation. Was she being too obvious in her interest? She'd been careful to maintain professional boundaries, never using her position to show favoritism or create special opportunities for Bobby. But perhaps her attention was more noticeable than she'd realized. Meanwhile, 29 floors above, Bobby was elbow-deep in an electrical panel, tracing wiring with the methodical patience of someone who understood that complex problems rarely had simple solutions. The conference room was one of titanium's crown jewels, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan and furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. Any luck? Asked James Mitchell, the facilities manager who'd been with the company since the Reagan administration. Getting there, Bobby replied, following a set of wires that seemed to disappear into the wall. Whoever did the original installation took some creative liberties with the electrical code. Give me another 20 minutes. As Bobby worked, he found himself thinking about his conversation with Kate. Her offer to help with Emma's educational opportunities had been genuine. He was sure of that. But it also highlighted the growing complexity of their friendship. Kate was clearly well-educated and well-connected, while Bobby was a maintenance worker, rebuilding his life one paycheck at a time. The gap between their worlds was real, even if it didn't feel significant when they were talking over lunch. Not that it mattered, Bobby reminded himself. Their friendship was exactly that friendship. Kate was kind, intelligent, and easy to talk to, but she was also sophisticated and successful in ways that made Bobby acutely aware of his own limitations. She deserved someone who could match her professionally and intellectually, not a widowed maintenance worker with a 12-year-old daughter and a mountain of debt. Found it, Bobby announced, identifying the loose connection that had been causing the intermittent power loss. Should be good as new. You're a lifesaver, James said with genuine relief. The Sterling brothers would have had my head if this meeting got disrupted. Sterling brothers. Richard and well, Richard's the CEO, but he's got family involved in the business. They don't mess around when it comes to client meetings. Bobby nodded, making the final connections and testing the system. The lights came on strong and steady, and the conference room hummed back to full functionality. As he packed up his tools, Bobby caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway. A tall man in an expensive suit was walking toward the conference room, flanked by two other men in equally impressive attire. The man in the center had the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. That's Richard Sterling, James whispered. The CEO, probably here to prep for his meeting. Bobby gathered his tools quietly, not wanting to intrude on executive business. But as he headed toward the elevator, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was seeing Kate's world for the first time, a realm of power suits and boardrooms, and decisions that affected thousands of lives. It was a reminder of just how different their realities were, and how careful he needed to be not to mistake kindness for something more. The photo appeared on page 6 of the Chicago Tribune's lifestyle section on a crisp Tuesday morning in early February. It was a grainy shot taken through the window of Manny's Deli, showing Bobby and Kate sharing a sandwich while Emma colored in a book across from them. The caption read, "Titanium Industries. Catherine Sterling enjoys a low-key lunch with mystery companions." Bobby stared at the newspaper in complete shock, reading the brief article that followed. Catherine Sterling, daughter of Titanium Industries founder Richard Sterling Sr., sister to current CEO Richard Sterling Jr., and rumored to be one of Chicago's most eligible bachelorettes, despite her preference for privacy. "Dad." Emma's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Bobby looked up at his daughter, who was eating cereal at their kitchen table, completely unaware that their private world had just been turned upside down. Kate, the woman from the legal department who brought homemade sandwiches and knew where to find the good coffee, was Catherine Sterling. Not just any Sterling, but a Sterling with enough money and power to buy and sell his entire existence without thinking twice. "Nothing, sweetheart," Bobby managed, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. "Just work stuff." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Every conversation they'd had. Every moment of connection he'd felt. Every time he'd thought they were just two people getting to know each other, it had all been built on a lie. Not a malicious lie, perhaps, but a deception nonetheless. Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Joe Martinez. "Holy shit! Bobby, you didn't tell me you were dating a Sterling. Check the Tribune." Then another from Sandra Walsh. "Bobby, we need to talk. Can you come in early today?" And then, inevitably, one from Kate herself. "Bobby, I can explain. Please let me explain." Bobby stared at Kate's message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. He needed to think, needed to figure out how to process this revelation without Emma noticing that her father's world had just shifted on its axis. "Dad, you're making your worried face again," Emma observed, looking up from her cereal. "Is it about money because I know things are better now with your new job?" "No, money's fine." Bobby forced a smile. "Just trying to figure out some grown-up stuff." "Does it have to do with Kate?" Bobby's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Emma shrugged with the casual wisdom of a 12-year-old who paid attention to everything. "You've been happier since you started having lunch with her. You smile more, and you don't get that line between your eyebrows when you're thinking about Mom." The observation hit Bobby like a physical blow. Had his feelings for Kate been that obvious? And if Emma had noticed, who else had? "Kate's just a friend from work, kiddo." "I know, but she makes you happy. That's good." "Right." Bobby knelt beside Emma's chair, taking her small hands in his. "Em, you know I'll always love your mom." "Right. Nothing and no one will ever change that." "I know, Dad. But Mom would want you to be happy. She told me so. Remember when she was sick? She said I should make sure you didn't forget how to smile." The memory hit Bobby with unexpected force. Sarah, thin and weak from chemotherapy, calling Emma to her bedside for one of their private conversations. He'd never known what they talked about during those moments, but Emma had emerged from each one with a strange, adult-like composure that had both impressed and worried him. "She did say that, didn't she?" Bobby managed. "So if Kate makes you smile, then I like her. Even if she is ridiculously rich." Bobby blinked. "What makes you think Kate is rich?" Emma rolled her eyes with preteen exasperation. "Dad, her lunch yesterday was wrapped in what looked like actual cloth napkins. Plus, she knew about that Northwestern architecture program off the top of her head, and she's been asking me really specific questions about what kind of art supplies I like. Rich people know stuff like that." Sometimes Bobby forgot that Emma had grown up in children's hospital wards, surrounded by families from every economic background imaginable. She'd learned to read the subtle signs of wealth and poverty with the accuracy of a social worker. And you're okay with that, Dad? As long as she's nice to you and doesn't try to change who we are, I don't care if she's secretly a millionaire. Though if she is, maybe she could help with my college fund. Bobby laughed despite everything. Emma Martinez, you are going to rule the world someday. I know, Emma said with perfect confidence. But first, I need to finish 7th grade. As Bobby prepared for what was sure to be a difficult day at work, he tried to process Emma's casual acceptance of their situation. His daughter had somehow figured out that Kate was wealthy and had decided it didn't matter as long as everyone involved was genuine. It was a remarkably mature perspective from someone who still needed help reaching the top shelf in grocery stores. But Bobby couldn't shake the feeling that Emma's optimism might be misplaced. Wealthy people didn't date maintenance workers. They might be kind to them, might even develop friendships with them, but they didn't build lives with them. Kate's deception, however well-intentioned, was proof of that. She'd felt the need to hide her identity because she knew the truth would change everything. And it had. By the time Bobby arrived at Titanium Industries, the lobby buzzed with the kind of subdued excitement that came with gossip involving the boss's family. He could feel eyes following him as he made his way to the service elevator, could hear conversations stop mid-sentence as he passed. Bobby, Sandra Walsh intercepted him before he could reach his locker. We need to talk. My office. Now. Sandra's office was small and cluttered, filled with employee files and safety manuals. She closed the door behind them and turned to face Bobby with an expression that mixed concern with barely contained curiosity. So, she said without preamble, Catherine Sterling. I had no idea who she was, Bobby replied honestly. She told me she worked in legal. Technically, she does. She has a law degree, and she does review legal matters for the company. But Bobby, she's not just any Sterling family member. She's major money. Like, buy a small country money. Bobby sank into the chair across from Sandra's desk. How major? Richard Sterling Jr. might be the CEO, but word is that Catherine controls the majority stake in the company through some kind of family trust. She's the real power behind the throne, just prefers to stay out of the spotlight. The revelation hit Bobby like a second wave of shock. Kate wasn't just wealthy, she was potentially his boss's boss's boss. Every conversation they'd had, every moment of seeming equality, had been built on a fundamental imbalance of power that she'd chosen to conceal. Sandra, am I in trouble here because I swear, I had no idea. You're not in trouble, Sandra said quickly. But Bobby, this is complicated. There are going to be questions about favoritism, about whether you got this job on merit or because Catherine Sterling took a personal interest. There might be investigations, policy reviews. I earned this job, Bobby said firmly. I've done good work here. Ask anyone on my crew. I know that, and your work record speaks for itself. But perception matters in corporate environments. And right now, the perception is that you're dating the boss? Bobby stood up, pacing the small space. I'm not dating anyone. Kate and I are friends. We're friends. Hell, I don't know what we are now. Have you talked to her since the story broke? She texted. I haven't responded. Sandra studied him carefully. Bobby, can I give you some advice? As someone who's been navigating corporate politics for 20 years. Bobby nodded. Don't let pride make decisions for you. Yes, this is complicated. Yes, there are power dynamics at play that you didn't know about. But if Catherine Sterling went to the trouble of hiding her identity to get to know you as a regular person, that says something about her character. Rich people don't usually bother with elaborate deceptions just to make friends with the maintenance staff. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe she was just as surprised by your friendship as you were. And maybe instead of assuming the worst, you should give her a chance to explain. Before Bobby could respond, there was a knock on Sandra's door. Come in, she called. The door opened to reveal Tom Richardson from HR, looking unusually flustered. Sandra, we have a situation. Catherine Sterling is here, and she's asking to speak with Bobby Martinez. She's insistent. Sandra and Bobby exchanged glances. Where is she? Conference room A. And Sandra, she's not taking no for an answer. Bobby felt his stomach drop. Conference room A was the main executive meeting space, the one with the expensive furniture and lake views. It was where the Sterling family conducted their most important business. I'll go, Bobby said quietly. Whatever this is, let's get it over with. As he walked toward the elevator that would take him to the executive floor, Bobby tried to prepare himself for whatever version of Kate or Catherine he was about to encounter. The woman who'd shared her lunch and listened to his stories about Emma, or the Sterling family heiress who could end his career with a phone call. He had a sinking feeling he was about to find out which one was real. Conference room A was even more intimidating than Bobby remembered from his brief glimpse weeks earlier. The polished mahogany table could seat 20 people, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan that probably cost more than Bobby's annual salary just to maintain. Kate Catherine sat at the far end of the table, her posture straight but her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She was dressed in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than Bobby's car. Her hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look every inch the corporate executive. This wasn't the woman who'd laughed at his jokes over homemade sandwiches. This was Catherine Sterling, and the transformation was jarring. Thank you for coming, she said as Bobby entered the room. Her voice was steady, professional, but Bobby could see tension in the set of her shoulders. Did I have a choice? Bobby remained standing near the door, not sure whether he was here as an employee being disciplined or as whatever they had been to each other. Of course you have a choice. You always have a choice. Kate gestured to a chair. Please, sit. We need to talk. Bobby reluctantly took a seat, but chose one halfway down the table rather than beside her. The distance felt necessary, a physical reminder of the gulf that had always existed between them, even when he'd been unaware of it. I suppose you've seen the newspaper, Kate began. Kind of hard to miss. Catherine Sterling enjoys low-key lunch with mystery companions. That's me and Emma, by the way. The mystery companions. Kate winced. I know. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I was planning to tell you. When Bobby's voice was sharper than he'd intended. When exactly were you planning to mention that you're not actually Kate from legal, but Catherine Sterling, sister to the CEO, and apparently one of Chicago's wealthiest women? I am Kate from legal, she said firmly. That part wasn't a lie. I do have a law degree. I do review legal matters for the company. But you left out the part where you could buy and sell this entire building without checking your bank balance. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation and hurt. Kate looked down at her hands, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. My full name is Catherine Elizabeth Sterling. I'm 42 years old. I have a law degree from Harvard, and yes, I control the majority stake in Titanium Industries through a family trust established by my father. I'm also divorced. I prefer hiking to shopping. I think the Cubs have a real shot this year, and I genuinely enjoy talking with you more than I've enjoyed talking with anyone in years. Bobby felt some of his anger deflate, but the hurt remained. Why didn't you tell me? Because, Kate said, looking up to meet his eyes. When was the last time someone talked to you like you were just Bobby, instead of Bobby the widower, or Bobby the struggling single dad, or Bobby the guy who used to be an engineer but now fixes toilets? The question caught Bobby off guard. That's different. Is it you reinvented yourself after your wife died, took on a new identity as a maintenance worker because that's what was available? I've been reinventing myself my entire life, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by my last name or my bank account. But you lied about who you were. I omitted details about my background, just like you omitted details about yours. Kate's voice grew stronger, more confident. When we first met, you didn't mention that you used to design manufacturing systems or that you once owned your own consulting business, or that you lost everything paying for your wife's cancer treatment. You let me assume you were just a maintenance worker who'd always been a maintenance worker. Bobby opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She had a point, though it felt different somehow. His omissions had been about hiding failure and protecting pride. Hers had been about, what exactly why? Kate, what did you get out of pretending to be someone else? Kate was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lake. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Do you know what it's like to have people want to be your friend because of what you can do for them? To never be sure if someone likes you or likes your connections? To wonder if every relationship is transactional? She turned back to Bobby, and he could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I've been divorced for 5 years. In that time, I've been set up with investment bankers who spent the entire dinner talking about mergers they wanted me to finance, tech entrepreneurs who pitched business ideas between courses, and philanthropists who wanted me to write checks for their pet causes. No one ever asked me what I wanted, what I dreamed about, what made me laugh. So you decided to slum it with the maintenance guy. Kate's eyes flashed. I decided to see what it felt like to be treated like a normal person. And you, Bobby Martinez, who fixes things and loves his daughter and makes terrible jokes about building maintenance, you treated me like I mattered as a person, not as a bank account with legs. Bobby felt his anger wavering, replaced by something more complicated. But what was the end game? Kate, eventually, I was going to find out who you really were. Did you think I'd just be okay with it? I hoped you'd understand that the woman you got to know over lunch is the real me. The money, the company, the sterling name that's all inheritance and obligation. But the person who laughs at your stories about Emma and shares her sandwich because she made too much, that's who I actually am when no one's watching. Bobby stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city spread below. From this height, the people on the streets looked like toys, insignificant and easily moved around. Was that how Kate saw him, as someone small and manageable? Bobby, Kate said softly behind him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that you're probably right about one thing, he said without turning around. If I'd known who you were from the beginning, I never would have relaxed around you. I would have been polite, professional, grateful for any attention from someone so far above my pay grade. And that would have been a tragedy. Bobby turned to face her. Maybe it would have been more honest? Maybe we could have been friends without all this complexity. Or maybe we never would have been friends at all. Maybe you would have seen the name and the money and decided I wasn't worth getting to know. It was Bobby's turn to be quiet. How many times had he made assumptions about wealthy people? How often had he dismissed them as out of touch or privileged without bothering to look deeper? This is complicated, Kate. I know. People are going to think I'm using you, or that you're slumming, or that I somehow manipulated my way into this job. Let them think what they want. We know the truth. Bobby shook his head. It's not that simple. I have a daughter to think about. Emma's already been through enough without having to deal with gossip and speculation about her father's personal life. Emma's stronger than you give her credit for. How would you know? The words came out harsher than Bobby intended, but he was tired of being told what was best for his daughter by people who'd never had to make the hard choices he'd made. Kate stood up slowly. Her expression hurt, but not angry. You're right. I don't know Emma the way you do. I don't know what it's like to be a single parent, or to worry about paying rent, or to choose between groceries and medicine. I've never had to be that strong or that careful with someone else's heart. She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. But I do know what it's like to be lonely. Bobby, I know what it's like to wonder if anyone will ever see past the surface to the person underneath. And I know that the hours I've spent talking with you and Emma have been the happiest I've had in years. Kate opened the door, then looked back at him one more time. I'm not asking you to forgive me for not telling you everything about myself from the start. I'm just asking you not to decide that everything we've shared was meaningless because of what you didn't know. After she left, Bobby stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and power that represented everything he'd never be able to offer Kate in return. But her words echoed in his mind: the hours I've spent talking with you and Emma have been the happiest I've had in years. Maybe money couldn't buy everything after all. Maybe the question wasn't whether they came from different worlds, but whether they could build a new one together. Bobby found Emma in the Titanium Industries Childcare Center after school, sitting cross-legged on the floor with three younger children gathered around her. She was showing them how to fold paper airplanes, her voice patient and encouraging as she guided small fingers through the complex creases. The secret, Emma was saying to a 6-year-old boy who was struggling with his fold, is to make sure the edges line up perfectly. See, like this. Mrs. the childcare director, approached Bobby with a warm smile. She's been helping with the younger children all week. Natural teacher instincts. You should be very proud. Bobby was proud, but as he watched his daughter patiently help another child, he felt the weight of the decision he was facing. Emma had found her place here, had made friends and discovered a talent for leadership. Whatever happened between him and Kate, he couldn't let it disrupt the stability Emma had finally found. Em, he called softly. Time to head home. Emma looked up, her face brightening when she saw him. Dad, perfect timing. I just taught Marcus how to make a plane that can fly all the way across the room. As they gathered Emma's things and said goodbye to her new friends, Bobby tried to figure out how to broach the subject of Kate's revelation. Emma had already figured out that Kate was wealthy, but Bobby wasn't sure she understood the full scope of what that meant. So, Emma said as they walked toward the bus stop, I heard some of the grown-ups talking about Kate today. Apparently, she's super important around here. Bobby stopped walking. What did you hear? Mrs. Chen was talking to one of the other teachers about how Kate Sterling is actually the sister of the big boss, and how she's really rich but likes to pretend she's not. Emma looked up at Bobby with curious eyes. Is that why you've been so quiet today, because you found out Kate is fancy? Sometimes Bobby marveled at his daughter's ability to cut straight to the heart of complex issues. Something like that. How do you feel about it? Emma shrugged. I mean, I kind of already knew she was rich. Her shoes are really expensive, and she always has exact change for everything. Plus, she knew about that Northwestern program without having to look it up. And that doesn't bother you. Why would it bother me? Emma asked with genuine confusion. She's still the same person who remembered that I like purple pens and who listened to all my stories about the giraffe drawing contest. They resumed walking, Emma chattering about her day, while Bobby processed her matter-of-fact acceptance of the situation. His 12-year-old daughter had apparently figured out weeks ago what had taken him completely by surprise, and she'd decided it didn't matter. Dad, Emma said suddenly, are you going to stop being friends with Kate because she's rich? It's complicated, sweetheart. No, it's not. Emma stopped walking and turned to face him with the serious expression she wore when she was about to impart wisdom that made Bobby feel like the child in their relationship. Either you like her or you don't. Either she makes you happy or she doesn't. The money stuff is just stuff. Emma, there are things you don't understand about the adult world. Like what? Like how some people think you're only supposed to be friends with people who have the same amount of money as you? That's stupid. Bobby smiled despite everything. When did you get so wise? I've been wise, you just don't always pay attention. Emma grinned and took his hand. So are you going to stop being Kate's friend? I don't know yet. Well, while you're figuring it out, maybe you should think about this. Kate could probably eat lunch anywhere she wants, with anyone she wants. But she chose to eat lunch with you. That has to mean something, right? As they boarded the bus home, Bobby found himself thinking about Emma's simple logic. Kate could indeed eat lunch anywhere, with anyone. She could surround herself with people who shared her background, her education, her social status. Instead, she'd chosen to spend her time with a maintenance worker and his daughter. That evening, after Emma had finished her homework and settled in to watch a movie, Bobby sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to sort through his feelings. The hurt was still there, the sting of discovering that someone he'd grown to care about had been keeping such a significant secret. But underneath the hurt was something else, the memory of Kate's voice when she talked about loneliness, about never being sure if people liked her for herself or for what she could provide. Bobby thought about his own secrets, the parts of his story he'd chosen not to share. Kate was right. He had let her assume things about his background that weren't entirely accurate. He'd been an engineer once, had owned his own consulting firm, had worn suits to work and made decisions that affected dozens of employees. The maintenance worker identity was real now, but it wasn't the whole truth of who he was. Maybe they'd both been playing roles, trying on different versions of themselves to see how they fit. His phone buzzed with a text message. Kate's name appeared on the screen, and Bobby hesitated before opening it. "I know you need time to think, and I respect that, but I wanted you to know that Emma's application for the Northwestern Summer Architecture Program has been submitted. Full scholarship, merit-based. She'll hear back in 2 weeks. This has nothing to do with us and everything to do with her talent." Bobby stared at the message, emotions warring in his chest. Kate had followed through on her offer to help Emma, even after their confrontation in the conference room. She was using her connections to open doors for his daughter, creating opportunities that Bobby could never provide on his own. It was exactly the kind of gesture that made him question whether their friendship could ever be truly equal. But it was also exactly the kind of thoughtfulness that had drawn him to Kate in the first place, her ability to see what people needed and find ways to help without making them feel diminished. Bobby typed and deleted several responses before settling on something simple. "Thank you." Kate's reply came immediately. "She deserves every opportunity. You both do." Bobby set down his phone and walked to Emma's bedroom doorway. She was fast asleep, her sketchbook open beside her pillow, with a half-finished drawing of what looked like a building shaped like a tree. Even in sleep, she was dreaming of creating beautiful things, of making the world a little more wonderful through her vision. Kate had seen that in Emma, had recognized her potential and taken steps to nurture it. Whatever complications existed between him and Kate, his daughter's future mattered more than his pride. Maybe it was time to stop focusing on what separated them and start thinking about what they might be able to build together. The Northwestern University campus was covered in a light dusting of snow when Bobby and Emma arrived for the summer architecture program interview. Emma clutched her portfolio with nervous excitement, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air as she chattered about the buildings they'd passed on the drive. "Look at that one, Dad," she said, pointing to a modernist structure with interesting angles. "It looks like it's reaching toward the sky. I wonder if that was intentional or if the architect just ran out of straight lines." Bobby smiled, his pride in his daughter temporarily overwhelming his nervousness about the day ahead. Emma had been accepted into the program's final round, a competitive interview process that would determine which 15 students would be awarded full scholarships. Kate had kept her word about the merit-based selection. Emma was here purely on the strength of her portfolio and academic record. "Remember," Bobby said as they approached the architecture building, "just be yourself. Your work speaks for itself." "I know, Dad. You've only told me that 17 times since breakfast." Inside the building, they were greeted by Dr. Sarah Williams, a woman in her 50s with paint-stained fingers and the kind of enthusiastic energy that suggested she'd found her calling in life. "You must be Emma Martinez," Dr. Williams said, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I've been looking forward to meeting the artist behind those remarkable building designs." Emma beamed and shook the professor's hand with confidence that made Bobby's heart swell. "Thank you for considering me for the program. Dr. Williams, I've been dreaming about this since I was 8. Well, let's see if we can help make those dreams a reality." "Emma, you'll be interviewing with our student selection committee, 3 current students and 2 faculty members. Very informal, just a chance for us to get to know you better." As Emma was led away for her interview, Bobby settled into a waiting area filled with other nervous parents. He tried to focus on a magazine, but his mind kept drifting to Kate. She'd made this opportunity possible, had opened a door that would have remained forever closed without her intervention. Since their confrontation in the conference room 2 weeks earlier, They'd exchanged only a few brief text messages, updates about Emma's application, a simple thank you from Bobby when the interview was scheduled. They hadn't seen each other at work. Kate seemed to be avoiding the employee cafeteria, and Bobby had been careful not to venture into areas where they might accidentally meet. He missed her. That was the truth he'd been trying to avoid. The fact that made all his noble concerns about class differences and power imbalances feel hollow. He missed her laugh, missed the way she listened with complete attention when he talked about Emma, missed the feeling that someone understood both his struggles and his dreams. Mr. Martinez. Bobby looked up to find a young man in his 20s approaching with a friendly smile. I'm David Chen, one of the student committee members. I just wanted to introduce myself and tell you that your daughter is extraordinary. The interview's over already. Just finished. Emma's in the main studio with Dr. Williams, looking at some of the work current students have done. But I wanted to speak with you privately, if you don't mind. They walked to a quiet corner of the waiting area, where David lowered his voice conspiratorially. Officially, we're not supposed to indicate our decisions until all the interviews are complete. Unofficially, Emma Martinez is exactly the kind of student this program was designed to serve. Her talent is obvious, but more than that, she has vision. She doesn't just want to design buildings, she wants to design hope. Bobby felt his throat tighten with emotion. She's always been special. The committee was particularly impressed by her essay about designing affordable housing that doesn't look like affordable housing. She wrote about wanting to create beautiful spaces for families like yours, families who deserve dignity and beauty even when money is tight. That sounds like Emma. David hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Mr. Martinez, can I ask you something? The scholarship that's covering Emma's tuition and expenses, do you know where it came from? Bobby frowned. Kate mentioned it was merit-based, funded by the university. It is merit-based, absolutely, but the funding comes from a private donor who specifically requested that we identify talented students from working-class families. The donor wanted to remain anonymous, but David smiled knowingly. Let's just say that someone who cares about Emma's future made sure the money was available. Bobby's heart began to race. Kate, I can't say for certain, but the donation was made just days after your daughter's portfolio was submitted. And the donor specifically mentioned wanting to support children of single parents who were rebuilding their lives after hardship. Bobby sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed. Kate hadn't just used her connections to get Emma an interview. She'd created a scholarship specifically designed for students like his daughter. She'd found a way to help that was both generous and dignified, providing opportunity without charity. Mr. Martinez, are you all right? I need to make a phone call, Bobby said, standing up quickly. When Emma's finished, could you tell her I'll be right back? Bobby stepped outside into the cold afternoon air and dialed Kate's number with shaking fingers. She answered on the second ring. Bobby, is everything okay? How did Emma's interview go? She got the scholarship, didn't she? Not just any scholarship, one you created specifically for her. There was a long pause. Bobby, Kate, did you create a scholarship fund for Emma? Another pause, then a quiet sigh. I created a scholarship fund for students like Emma, talented kids from working families who deserve the same opportunities as everyone else. Emma happened to be the first recipient, but she won't be the last. Bobby closed his eyes, feeling the last of his resistance crumble. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have said no. You would have seen it as charity instead of what it really is, an investment in extraordinary young people who are going to change the world. Kate, Emma earned this. Bobby, her talent earned it. Her vision earned it. Her determination earned it. I just made sure that financial barriers wouldn't keep her from reaching her potential. Bobby found himself smiling through tears he hadn't realized were falling. You're incredible. You know that. I'm a woman with too much money who finally found a worthwhile way to spend it. You're more than that. Bobby took a deep breath, making a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Kate, I've been an idiot. About what? About us. About thinking that our backgrounds matter more than who we are as people. About being so worried about appearances that I forgot what actually matters. And what's that? That you make me laugh. That you listen to Emma like her dreams are as important as corporate quarterly reports. That you've shown us both what it means to be seen and valued for who we really are. Kate's voice was soft when she replied, Bobby, are you saying? I'm saying that if you're willing to give us another chance, I'd like to take you and Emma out for dinner. Somewhere nice where we can talk without worrying about cafeteria schedules or work hierarchies. I would love that. Good. Because Emma's going to want to celebrate her scholarship, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather celebrate with than the woman who made it possible. When Bobby returned to the architecture building, he found Emma in animated conversation with Dr. Williams about sustainable building materials and urban planning principles. His daughter's face was glowing with excitement and possibility, and Bobby realized that Kate had given them something more valuable than money or connections. She'd given them a future where Emma's dreams weren't limited by their circumstances, where talent and determination mattered more than bank accounts, where a maintenance worker's daughter could stand in a university classroom and talk about changing the world. That evening, Bobby called Kate to arrange their dinner. As he listened to her excitement about Emma's success and her suggestions for restaurants that served Emma's favorite foods, Bobby realized that he'd been wrong about one crucial thing. Kate Sterling wasn't trying to rescue him or improve his circumstances out of pity or noblesse oblige. She was investing in his family because she saw their potential, because she believed in their worth as human beings, because she'd found in them the authentic connection she'd been searching for her entire life. They weren't from the same world, but they were building a new one together. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Bobby allowed himself to believe that the future might hold more than just survival. It might hold joy. 1 year later, snow was falling steadily outside the windows of Bobby and Kate's new home, a comfortable two-story house in Evanston with a backyard big enough for Emma's art studio and close enough to Northwestern that she could participate in the architecture program's weekend workshops. The house itself was a compromise that reflected both their sensibilities, well-built and beautifully designed, but not ostentatious. Kate had insisted on excellent bones and energy efficiency. Bobby had added thoughtful storage solutions and a workshop where he could pursue the furniture-making hobby he'd rediscovered. Emma had claimed the sunniest bedroom for her art supplies and covered one wall with sketches of the sustainable housing development she planned to design someday. Christmas morning found the three of them gathered around a tree that Emma had insisted on decorating with handmade ornaments and strings of popcorn. Kate wore flannel pajamas and fuzzy slippers, a far cry from the corporate suits she'd once lived in, while Bobby made pancakes in the kitchen, and Emma sorted through presents with the methodical precision of someone who wanted to savor every moment. Dad, Emma called from the living room, Kate's present from you is making her cry. Good tears or bad tears, Bobby called back, flipping the last pancake. Definitely good tears, Kate replied, her voice thick with emotion. Bobby, how did you? Bobby emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate of pancakes, grinning at the sight of Kate holding the wooden picture frame he'd spent months crafting in secret. Inside was Emma's original sketch of the three of them from that first day they'd all had lunch together. But Bobby had carved intricate details into the frame itself. Tiny buildings that represented Emma's architectural dreams, mathematical equations that honored his engineering background, and delicate flowers that reflected Kate's love of hiking and nature. Emma helped with the design, Bobby admitted, sitting down beside Kate on the couch. She said it needed to tell our whole story. Kate traced the carved details with her fingertip, marveling at the craftsmanship. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever owned. That's not even your real present, Emma announced, bouncing with excitement. Show her the other thing. Dad. Bobby reached behind the tree and pulled out a manila envelope, his hands suddenly nervous. This is bigger than a picture frame. Kate looked between Bobby and Emma, both of whom were watching her with expectant smiles. She opened the envelope carefully and pulled out a set of architectural drawings detailed plans for a community center that would include affordable childcare, adult education classes, job training programs, and youth activities. Bobby, these are incredible, Kate breathed, studying the designs. But I don't understand. It's for the Sterling Community Foundation, Emma explained, unable to contain her excitement any longer. Dad's been working with some of his engineering friends to design it, and I helped with the art therapy studio layout. We want to build it in the neighborhood where we used to live, so families like ours can have the same kinds of opportunities you gave us. Kate looked up at Bobby, tears streaming down her face. You want to start a foundation? We want to start a foundation, Bobby corrected gently. The three of us. Kate, you've spent your whole life having your money tell you what you should care about. What if instead, you used it to support the things you actually care about, like kids who need scholarships, and parents who need childcare, and families who just need someone to believe in them? Emma added. Kate set the drawings aside and pulled both Bobby and Emma into a fierce hug. You know this means you're stuck with me forever, right? Once we're business partners. There's no getting rid of me. Promise, Emma asked, her voice muffled against Kate's shoulder. I promise. Later that morning, as they sat around the breakfast table eating pancakes and planning their foundation's first initiatives, Bobby marveled at how much their lives had changed. Emma was thriving in the Northwestern program, already showing her work in local art shows and talking confidently about her plans for college. Kate had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Titanium Industries, transitioning into a role as chairman of the board, while Richard took on more operational responsibility. Most importantly, they'd become a family not through marriage or legal adoption, but through the daily choice to show up for each other, to celebrate each other's victories, and provide comfort during setbacks. You know, Kate said, reaching across the table to squeeze Bobby's hand, I never thought I'd be the type of person who cried over handmade Christmas presents. You never thought you'd be the type of person who wore flannel pajamas to breakfast either, Emma pointed out with a grin. True. Apparently, you two have been a very bad influence on my sophisticated image. Bobby laughed, thinking about the woman he'd first met in the cafeteria, polished, controlled, carefully maintaining the barriers between her public and private selves. The Kate sitting beside him now was relaxed, open, fully present in ways that money had never been able to buy. I love your unsophisticated side, he said, lifting their joined hands to kiss her knuckles. Good, Kate replied, because you're stuck with it. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of possibility. Inside their warm house, three people who'd found each other across the barriers of class and circumstance made plans to build something beautiful together. Not just a life, but a legacy of hope for families who were still struggling to find their place in an unforgiving world. It wasn't the Christmas any of them had expected when they'd first met in that intimidating corporate lobby. It was infinitely better. And in the end, that's what love really was, not the absence of obstacles, but the decision to face them together, building something stronger than either person could create alone. Emma was right. Bobby realized as he watched his daughter explain her latest architectural sketches to Kate with passionate enthusiasm. Love wasn't complicated at all. You either chose each other or you didn't. They had chosen each other every single day, and they would keep choosing each other for all the days to come. In the end, love isn't about finding someone from your world. It's about creating a new world together. Bobby Martinez walked into that glass tower carrying nothing but hope and a 12-year-old's dreams. He walked out with something money could never buy, a family forged, not by blood or circumstance, but by the daily choice to see each other's worth. Kate Sterling had spent her life hiding behind names and numbers, measuring her value in stock portfolios and board meetings. But sometimes the richest people are the poorest in the things that truly matter. Sometimes it takes a man with calloused hands and a daughter who draws buildings like poetry to remind you that wealth isn't what you own, it's what you're willing to give. The Chicago snow that Christmas morning fell on a house where a maintenance worker's sketches sat beside Harvard diplomas, where homemade ornaments hung next to priceless art, where three hearts had found what they'd been searching for all along: the courage to be seen, the grace to forgive, and the wisdom to know that some things are worth more than everything. Because in a world that teaches us to stay in our lanes, sometimes the most radical act is simply choosing to love. What would you choose